So this is 2 Maccabees chapter 8. This is basically just a recap of what we talked about last week. And it's kind of going a little bit into what we're going to read in 1 Maccabees 4 as well, but not really. It's more about recapping what we ended with last week. All right. So this 2 Maccabees chapter 8, starting with verse 1. Then Judas Maccabeus and they that were with him went privily into the towns and called their kinsfolk together and took unto them all such as continued in the Jews' religion and assembled about 6,000 men. All right. So again, if you've been keeping up with it, you know that the Greeks, when they came into power, specifically Antiochus the fourth, when he came into power, he started cracking down on the Jews. He started cracking down on the Israelites who wanted to keep God's commandments. He said, look, don't do that. Become like the Greeks. Do what we do. And obviously the people who wanted to serve God, they was like, no. So they run and fled from the Greeks who was trying to kill them for not wanting to be like the Greeks. And a man named Mattathias and his 5 sons chose to stand against these people. Judas Maccabeus is one of those 5 sons. He took over after his dad died. All right. He took over as in he was the captain of the army against these wicked Greeks. All right. And that's what you're seeing happening right here in 2 Maccabees 8. The army is gathering together. The army as in not anything official, not the official army of the people, but the people who stand against wickedness. They're gathering with Judas Maccabeus. All right. And they called upon the Lord that he would look upon the people that was trodden down of all, and also pity the temple profaned of ungodly men. Right. So the Greeks came in, they profaned the temple of God. All right. And that he would have compassion upon the city, sore defaced, and ready to be made even with the ground, and hear the blood that cried unto him, and remember the wicked slaughter of harmless infants, and the blasphemies committed against his name, and that he would show his hatred against the wicked in this case being the Greeks, who again slaughtered harmless infants. All right. If they found mothers circumcising their children, they would come through and not only kill the mother, but kill the child as well, because they did not want anyone to grow up in the laws of God. They wanted the people to grow up in Greek customs. Now, when Maccabeus had his company about him, he could not be withstood by the heathen, for the wrath of the Lord was turned into mercy. You see that right there. So in the hands of Judas Maccabeus, the people prospered, fighting against wickedness. Therefore, he came at unawares and burnt up towns and cities, and got into his hands the most commodious places, and overcame and put to flight no small number of his enemies, meaning a lot. When it says no small number, it means a large number of his enemies. But specially took he advantage of the night for such privy attempts, insomuch that the fruit of his holiness was spread everywhere. So everybody knew about Judas Maccabeus, that is. So when Philip saw that this man increased by little and little, and that things prospered with him still more and more, he wrote unto Ptolemaeus, the governor of Syria and Phoenice, to yield more aid to the king's affairs. Then forthwith choosing Nicanor, the son of Patroclus, these Greek names, please forgive me, they're hard to say, one of his special friends, he sent him with no fewer than 20,000 of all nations under him, to root out the whole generation of the Jews. And with him he joined also Gorgias, a captain who in matters of war had great experience. Right. So Philip, in the place of Antiochus Epiphanes, is choosing men to go to war with Judas and the Jews. All right. So Nicanor undertook to make so much money of the captive Jews as should defray the tribute of 2,000 talents, which the king was to pay to the Romans. Wherefore immediately he sent to the cities upon the seacoast, proclaiming a sale of the captive Jews, and promising that they should have 80 bodies for 1 talent. He said, look, I'm going to give you 90 of these Jews for 1 talent. Of I believe that's gold, could also be silver, not expecting the vengeance that was to follow upon him from the Almighty God. And that's what we see about Nicanor, and that's what we're going to read about concerning Nicanor over the next couple weeks. He was a wicked and proud man, who in this case, he the expression goes, he counted his He counted his chickens before they came home to roost. You know, he said, look, we're definitely going to beat these Jews into submission, and we're going to sell them as slaves afterwards. All right. Now, when word was brought unto Judas of Nicanor's coming, and he had imparted unto those that were with him that the army was at hand, they that were fearful and distrusted the justice of God fled and conveyed themselves away. Others sold all that they had left, and withal besought the Lord to deliver them, sold by the wicked Nicanor before they met together. And if not for their own sakes, yet for the covenants he had made with their fathers, and for his and for his holy and glorious name's sake, by which they were called. Right. So some people were fearful and they run away from this battle that was incoming. Others, they, prayed to the Lord and they made themselves ready for the battle because they were not afraid. All right. So Maccabeus called his men together unto the number of 6,000 and exhorted them not to be stricken with terror of the enemy, nor to fear the great multitude of the heathen who came wrongly against them, but to fight manfully, and to set before their eyes the injury that they had unjustly done to the holy place, and the cruel handling of the city whereof they made a mockery, and also the taking away of the government of their forefathers. Right. So he said, keep these things in mind. All right, fight for the justice of our people, which the Greeks have taken and done whatsoever they will to us. For they, said he, trust in their weapons and boldness, but our confidence is in the Almighty, who at a beck can cast down both them that come against us and also all the world. Right, so Judas had great faith. Judas Maccabeus had great faith in the Lord. He said, look, it doesn't matter how many they come with. God can destroy everyone all at once if he wanted to. All right. He said, because he read the scriptures. That's what he did during the days of Noah. He destroyed the whole world. All right. So Judas, he understands the scriptures. He understands the power of the Almighty. He said, look, fighting this battle, that's nothing to him. He can be with us. He will be with us if we trust in him. All right. Moreover, he recounted to them what helps their forefathers had found and how they were delivered when under Sennacherib 185,000 perished. That's 185,000 died in one night. That's when Hezekiah stayed faithful unto the Lord, prayed unto him, and an angel of the Lord came down and destroyed all of Sennacherib's army in one night. All right. Sennacherib woke up the next morning and they were all dead. All right. That's why the Assyrians were never able to take Jerusalem. They took other cities of Judah, but they were never able to take Jerusalem because the Lord fought for his people. Right. So Judas, again, he's recalling the scriptures and showing the people, look, just have faith in the Lord. He can deliver us. And he told them of the battle that they had in Babylon with the Galatians, how they came but 8,000 in all to the business, with 4,000 Macedonians, and that the Macedonians being perplexed, that 8,000 destroyed 120,000 because of the help that they had from heaven, and so received a great booty. Thus, when he had made them bold with these words and ready to die for the law and the country, he divided his army into 4 parts and joined with himself his own brethren, leaders of each band, to wit, Simon and Joseph and Jonathan, giving each one 1,500 men. He said, look, y'all going to have this battalion. Y'all going to be in this battalion over here. Y'all going to have this over here. That's what a great leader does. That's what a captain does. He designates, and he says, look, y'all will be good over here doing this. Y'all will be good over here doing that. Verse 23. Also, he appointed Eleazar to read the holy book. And when he had given them this watchword, the help of God, himself leading the first band. Right. So of course Judas led them all into battle, and he had his group. Right. He had his group. He gave a group to Simon, Joseph, Jonathan. He had Eleazar there reading the word, because that's the foundation of it all, is the word of God. All right. And by the help of the Almighty, they slew above 9,000 of their enemies, and wounded and maimed the most part of Nicanor's host, and so put all to flight. And they took their money that came to buy them and pursued them far, but lacking time, they returned. Right. So they didn't get to chase down all the people who wanted to buy them as slaves, but they had to return, for it was the day before the Sabbath, and therefore they would no longer pursue them. They said, look, we ain't got to chase after them because it's the Sabbath. We're going to go prepare for the Sabbath. We're going to keep the Sabbath day. So when they had gathered their armor together and spoiled their enemies, they occupied themselves about the Sabbath, yielding exceeding praise and thanks to the Lord, who had preserved them unto that day, which was the beginning of mercy distilling upon them. All right, so it was a sign of good things to come. And after the Sabbath, when they had given part of the spoils to the maimed and the widows and orphans, the residue they divided among themselves and their servants. Notice that filling their own pockets was not their first priority. Their first priority was to help those who needed it. All right. When this was done, and they had made a common supplication, they besought the merciful Lord to be reconciled with his servants forever. Right. And they prayed unto God that he would be with us forever. Moreover, of those that were with Timotheus and Bacchides, who fought against them, they slew above 20,000, and very easily got high in strongholds, and divided among themselves many spoils more, and made the maimed, orphans, widows, yea, and the aged also, equal in spoils with themselves. You see that right there? So again, providing for those who need it just as much as they, are giving to themselves. And when they had gathered their armor together, they laid them up all carefully in convenient places, and the remnant of the spoils they brought to Jerusalem. Right. So they had, put this and that away as far as, in a savings, if that's what you want to refer to it as. And then they brought the rest to Jerusalem. They slew also Philarchus, that wicked person who was with Timotheus and had annoyed the Jews many ways. Furthermore, at such time as they kept the feast for the victory in their country, they burnt Callisthenes, that had set fire upon the holy gates, who had fled into a little house, and so he received a reward meet for his wickedness. Right, so they're chasing down all the enemies. Right, nobody's escaping the judgment of God. All right. As for that most ungracious Nicanor, who had brought 1,000 merchants to buy the Jews, he was, through the help of the Lord, brought down by them, of whom he made least account. And putting off his glorious apparel and discharging his company, he came like a fugitive servant through the midland unto Antioch, having very great dishonor, for that his host was destroyed. Right, so Nicanor thought, this is going to be quick and easy. He thought he was just going to come in, take these Jews as slaves, and sell them all over the place. Right? He thought this was going to be an easy battle. He ended up losing and had to go back home in defeat with his tail between his legs, so to speak. Thus he that took upon him to make good to the Romans their tribute by means of captives in Jerusalem, told abroad that the Jews had God to fight for them, and therefore they could not be hurt because they followed the laws that he gave them. You see right there, he had to humble himself and say, look, I could not defeat the Jews because they were righteous, and God was fighting with them. All right, so with that, we're going to jump back to 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and I want to get this specifically because, as you can see in the title, this is the origin of the Feast of Dedication, aka Hanukkah. So we're gonna read about that real quick before we go to 2 Maccabees chapter 9 and 1 Maccabees 6. I want to get to at least that point. All right. Then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night. So this is if you remember the cliffhanger that we left off with last week. This is Judas and his men coming up to Jerusalem. All right. And all the heathen have overtaken Jerusalem, and they have, basically destroyed the city, profaned the holy temple. To the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. All right, so that's Gorgias and his men. Now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army, which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. So Judas saw that the people were ready to fight him in Jerusalem, and so he went around to Emmaus. In the mean season, that's like snowy weather, came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas. And when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, For said he, these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were expert of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, Fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. So I want you to recognize that Judas, before he goes into a battle, anytime he wants to exhort or encourage the people, he brings up the history. He brings up the scriptures that God give us for our comfort and hope. He's saying, look, use the scriptures, use what God has done for our people in the past as a means of comfort and hope. All right. So, excuse me. Verse 11. That so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle. But they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. And again, just about every battle that Judas went into, he put the enemy to flight, had them running scared. All right, even though 9 times out of 10, Judas had less men. All right, so again, it's not the number or the size of the army. It's God who declares who wins the battle. All right. Where was that? Verse 15. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword. Right? All that were too slow, they all died. For they pursued them unto Gezerah, and unto the plains of Idumea and Azotus, that's Ashdod, and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them upon a 3,000 men. Right? So it was 3,000 of them, of Gorgias's men died. Got killed in war. This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them, and said to the people, Be not greedy of the spoil, inasmuch as there is a battle before us. He said, look, we still got work to do. Don't get caught up. Don't celebrate just yet. We still got work to do. And Gorgias and his host are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this you may boldly take the spoils. As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight, and were burning the tents for the smoke that was seen, declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled everyone into the land of strangers. You see that right there? So they didn't even have to join in battle with them for them to get afraid. All right, they saw what had happened to their men, and they said, and you know, by this time, the rumors of what Judas Maccabeus has been doing, what the Jews have been doing, had spread amongst all the heathen. So they know, they said, oh no, the rumors are true. We got to get out of here. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and great riches. After this they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised the Lord in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who when he heard thereof was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. Right? So Lysias is saying, oh no, my job's in jeopardy. I promised the king I would do this and that, and now look at what happened. Ain't none of it happened. The next year, therefore, following, Lysias gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot, so these are 60,000 footmen, and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. So at that point, even Judas had 10,000 men. But again, 10,000 compared to 65,000, you would think, oh, there's no way he's going to win this battle. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan the son of Saul and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those know, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. Right? So again, before Judas went into battle, what did he do? He prayed. All right. He exhorted the people with the acknowledgement of the history. Say, hey, look, God has delivered us before with less. All right, so we know that he can do it again. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, so once 5,000 died, they got an army of 65,000. Once 5,000 died, now everybody's running. All right. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judah's soldiers, and how they were ready to either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea. So Lysias has resolve. You know what I'm saying? He's persistent. He's just in wickedness, so he can't never defeat the righteous. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. All right. So as Lysias is gone for this time period, they said, look, we got to go clean up our home. We got to go take back our temple and dedicate it unto God. Upon this all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profane, and the gates burnt up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their head. Right. So this is they started mourning. This was a very sad thing to see, because they saw the glory of the temple. Now they see it all run down, just destroyed essentially. Nobody's been doing any grounds keeping that. You got grass and shrubs growing up through the floor. And fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Right? So you had some people on cleanup duty while others still got to fight. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary, and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach unto them, because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down. Right? So they said, look, we can't even use this altar no more. The heathen done been setting up their altar on top of this one to sacrifice unto Zeus, been sacrificing pigs and all other unclean animals on this. We can't even use this altar no more. We got to set up a new one. And laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look, at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Right? So if you recall, and I don't even recall how many years ago it was at this point. Let me go ahead and take a look. First, Maccabees chapter 1. We'll come right back to chapter 4. But So on the 25th day of the month Caslu, in which year was it? 145th year. So this is 3 years later. This is 3 years later. God had the people come in on the same day in the winter, the 25th day of the 9th month of the 9th moon, and he rededicated the temple the same day 3 years later that the heathen had come and, profaned it. They weren't even in that thing 3 years before the righteous had taken it back. All right. So look at what time. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrifice to sacrifice of deliverance and praise. You see that right there? So that's why Hanukkah is 8 days. It's because when the people rededicated the temple, they celebrated for 8 days. All right. Yes. So I read that right there. Sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. You see there's your decorations. If you like to decorate for the holidays, there you go. Decorate for Hanukkah. All right. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. So that's the 25th day of the 9th month, usually around November, December. All right. About mid-December is usually when it starts. All right. Not by the Gregorian calendar, by what God says about how the new year starts in the spring, and then when you count 9 months, you end up around the winter. All right. With mirth and gladness. At that time, also they builded up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. Right. So they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. All right. Idumea is the same as Edom. All right. So 1 Maccabees chapter 5, let's start with verse 1. Now when the nations round about heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much, right? Because they didn't want the Jews, the Israelites, to have hope. All right. They said, look, they're going to keep fighting against us when we try to force our wicked customs upon them. So they didn't like it. They didn't like it that we was in righteousness. Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them. And thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people. Right. So they just saw the people were moving in righteousness. That made them mad because, again, these are the wicked. All right. Then Judas fought against the children of Esau in Idumea at Orabatine, because they besieged Gael. And he gave them a great overthrow, and abated their courage, and took their spoils. Also he remembered the injury of the children of Ben, who had been a snare and an offense unto the people, and that they lay in wait for them in the ways. I'm not sure the children of Ben, who that is. Ben. Maybe Ben, maybe Ben. Clearly it's some people in the surrounding area. Could be Edomites, could be Ishmaelites, could even be Moab or Ammon or Amalek. It's very possible. All right. He shut them up therefore in the towers, and encamped against them, and destroyed them utterly, and burned the towers of that place with fire, and all that were therein. Afterward he passed over to the children of Ammon, where he found a mighty power and much people, with Timotheus their captain. So he fought many battles with them, till at length they were discomfited before him, and he smote them. And when he had taken Jazar with the towns belonging thereto, he returned into Judea. Then the heathen that were at Gilad assembled themselves together against the Israelites that were in their quarters to destroy them, but they fled to the fortress of Dithema. And Gilad, I'm fairly certain, is the same as Gilead in the Old Testament. So that would be east of the Jordan. All right. And I'm not pulling up maps as much just because a lot of these names are not the same names that you read about in the Old Testament. You had the Greeks come through and rename a lot of these cities. That's what the Greeks did. They renamed just about everything. They renamed peoples, they renamed lands, and cities. So even the Greek maps that I do have, they're not, they don't list all of these cities. All right. So we just kind of got to go off context clues to know what they're talking about. Like we know, we know that Dithema has to be like east of the Jordan, since this is talking about Gilead. And sent letters unto Judas and his brethren, the heathen that are round about us are assembled together against us to destroy us. All right. Right. So the Israelites that were in Gilead had fled to Dithema, and they wrote to Judas saying, hey, come help us out. And they are preparing to come and take the fortress whereunto we are fled, Timotheus being captain of their host. Come now, therefore, and deliver us from their hands, for many of us are slain. Yea, all our brethren that were in the places of Tobi are put to death. Their wives and their children also they have carried away captives and borne away their stuff, and they have destroyed there about 1,000 men. Right, so very much peril going on there east of the Jordan. They're writing to Judas and the army saying, look, come help us out, please. That the heathen are coming against us. While these letters were yet reading, behold, there came other messengers from Galilee with their clothes rent, who reported on this wise, and said, they of Ptolemais and of Tyrus and Zidon and all Galilee of the Gentiles are assembled together against us to consume us. Now when Judas and the people heard these words, there assembled a great congregation together to consult what they should do for their brethren that were in trouble, and assaulted of them. Then said Judas unto Simon his brother, choose thee out men, and go and deliver thy brethren that are in Galilee, for I and Jonathan my brother will go into the country of Gilead. So he left Joseph the son of Zacharias and Azarias, captains of the people, with the remnant of the host in Judea to keep it. Right, so here's what we saw in 2 Maccabees chapter 8, where Judas said, hey, y'all go here, I split up the people, y'all go here, we'll go over here, designated areas for the people to attend to. All right. Unto whom he gave commandments, saying, take ye the charge of this people, and see that ye make not war against the heathen until the time that we come again. Right. So Joseph and Azariah were just there to protect the people. They weren't there to go out and go to war. All right. They said, look, the people just need protecting while we're gone. Just protect the people and don't go out to war until we come back. All right. Now unto Simon were given 3,000 men to go into Galilee, and unto Judas 8,000 men for the country of Gilead. Then went Simon into Galilee, where he fought many battles with the heathen, so that the heathen were discomfited by him. And he pursued them unto the gate of Ptolemais. And there were slain of the heathen about 3,000 men, whose spoils he took. And those that were in Galilee and in Arbatis, with their wives and their children, all that they had, took he away with him, and brought them into Judea with great joy. So you see what's happening here as far as these lands like Galilee and Gilead that were originally part of the like the land that was given to the 12 tribes, if you read in Joshua, and even like in David and Solomon's kingdom, all these lands were part of the nation of Israel. Yet throughout the years, as the children of Israel went into captivity, these lands have been overrun by the other nations. All right. So even the remnant of the Israelites that are there, Simon and Judas and them, they have to go to these lands and deliver their people to bring them back to Judea. Even though this may be their homeland, this may be their land, they have to go get them and bring them back to Judea at this point in time. All right. We'll see later on down the line how specifically, well, I guess Judas recovers some of these lands, but also Jonathan and Simon actually get these territories incorporated back into Judea. All right, but that's a few more chapters over. All right. Verse 24. Judas Maccabeus also and his brother Jonathan went over Jordan and traveled 3 days' journey in the wilderness. And see, that's how we know Gilad is the same as Gilead, because we know it's on the other side of the Jordan. All right. Where they met with the Nabathites, who came unto them in a peaceable manner, and told them everything that had happened to their brethren in the land of Gilad, and how that many of them were shut up in Basora and Bozer and Elamer, Casphor, Maked, and Karnaim. All these cities are strong and great. And said, look, here's the specific cities where you can find your people being held captive, and that they were shut up in the rest of the cities of the country of Gilad, and that against tomorrow they had appointed to bring their host against the forts, and to take them and to destroy them all in one day. They said, look, we're coming. The heathen are leaving their fortified cities and going to all these different cities going to where your people are, and they're going to kill them. They're going to wipe them out in one day. Whereupon Judas and his host turned suddenly by the way of the wilderness unto Basora. And when they had won the city, he slew all the males with the edge of the sword, and took all their spoils, and burned the city with fire. From whence he removed by night, and went till he came to the fortress. And betimes in the morning they looked up, and behold, there was an innumerable people bearing ladders and other engines of war to take the fortress, for they assaulted them. When Judas therefore saw that the battle was begun, and that the cry of the city went up to heaven with trumpets and a great sound, he said unto his host, fight this day for your brethren. So he went forth behind them in 3 companies, who sounded their trumpets and cried with prayer. He said it right there. So everybody staying in the spirit, everybody staying in prayer as they're fighting this battle. Then the host of Timotheus, knowing that it was Maccabeus, fled from him. Wherefore he smote them with a great slaughter, so that there were killed of them that day about 8,000 men. This done, Judas turned aside to Maspha. And after he had assaulted it, he took and slew all the males therein, and received the spoils thereof, and burnt it with fire. You said it right there. So he's destroying all these cities where the heathen are, barricaded themselves. From thence went he and took Casphon, Maked, Bozer, and the other cities of the country of Gilad. After these things gathered Timotheus another host, and encamped against Raphan beyond the brook. So Judas sent men to espy the host, who brought him word, saying, all the heathen that be round about us are assembled unto them, even a very great host. He hath also hired the Arabians to help them, and they have pitched their tents beyond the brook, ready to come and fight against thee. Upon this Judas went to meet them. Then Timotheus said unto the captains of his host, when Judas and all his hosts come near the brook, if he pass over first unto us, we shall not be able to withstand him, for he will mightily prevail against us. So Timotheus wasn't no dummy. He was like, look, if they get the upper hand on us, it's over. Even though we got all these men and they don't have as many men, if they get the upper hand on us, it's over. All right. But if he be afraid and camp beyond the river, we shall go over unto him and prevail against him. Now when Judas came near the brook, he caused the scribes of the people to remain by the brook, unto whom he gave commandment, saying, suffer no man to remain in the camp, but let all come to the battle. So he went first over unto them, and all the people after him. Then all the heathen, being discomfited before him, cast away their weapons, and fled into the temple that was at Karnaim. Right? So based on what their own general Timotheus told them, everybody was afraid when they saw Judas come across the river. They were just afraid. They run away. But they took the city and burned the temple with all that were therein. Thus was Karnaim subdued. Neither could they stand any longer before Judas. You see that right there? So at this point, everybody's losing. Everybody's falling to Judas. Like, you cannot overcome this guy in battle. It's just impossible at this point. All right. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites that were in the country of Gilad, from the least unto the greatest, even their wives and their children and their stuff, a very great host, to the end they might come into the land of Judea. Now when they came unto Ephron, this was a great city in the way as they should go, very well fortified. They could not turn from it, either on the right hand or the left, but must needs pass through the midst of it. Then they of the city shut them out, and stopped up the gates with stones. You see that right there? So they had to go through the city to get back home, right? And the people of the city didn't want anything to do with Judas. Whereupon Judah sent unto them in a peaceable manner, saying, let us pass through your land to go into our country, and none shall do you any hurt. We will only pass through on foot, howbeit they would not open unto him. You see that right there? So whether this be, this is Ephron, right? Yeah. So whether this be a city of wicked Israelites or a city of the heathen, regardless, they being wicked toward Judas, it ain't gonna go well. Wherefore Judas commanded a proclamation to be made throughout the host, that every man should pitch his tent in the place where he was. So the soldiers pitched and assaulted the city all that day and all that night, till at the length the city was delivered into his hands. They said, look, if you ain't gonna let us pass through the city, we just gonna take it. We just gonna shut it down, and then we gonna go wherever we want to. Who then slew all the males with the edge of the sword and razed the city. When it says razed, it don't mean lifted up. It means erased. It said, and erased the city, erased it, and took the spoils thereof, and passed through the city over them that were slain. You see that right there? So you don't want to let us come through peacefully? All right. We're just going to walk over your dead bodies then. That's the way that they was rolling. All right. That's the army of God. That's how it goes down, man. That's how the kingdom going to be too. You read in Isaiah, it says, the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish. That's what it's going to be like. And of course, this wasn't even with eternal life. This was with men who were just mortal men. And God still was moving them like this. After this went they over Jordan into the great plain before Bethsan. And Judas gathered together those that came behind and exhorted the people all the way through, encouraged them till they came into the land of Judea. See, again, Judas, he was a great leader. Judas Maccabeus was a great leader. He always encouraged the people. He exhorted the people. He solidified their faith. He built up their faith. All right. Not only through his works and manly actions, but through his mighty speeches. All right. So they went up to Mount Zion with joy and gladness, where they offered burnt offerings, because not one of them were slain until they had returned in peace. Of all the thousands of men that Judas brought with him to fight in the land of Gilead, not one of them was slain, even though they done killed thousands. Now, what time as Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Gilad, and Simon his brother in Galilee before Ptolemais, Joseph the son of Zechariah and Azariah, captains of the garrisons, heard of the valiant acts and warlike deeds which they had done. Wherefore they said, let us also get us a name and go fight against the heathen that are round about us. So directly disobeying the orders of Judas that he told him. He said, look, don't go out to war, just stay here and protect the people. But then they said, look, y'all getting y'all a name, y'all doing this and that. We want to have fun too. Just completely missing the point. They got that pride about them. So when they had given charge unto the garrison that was with them, they went toward Jamnia. Then came Gorgias and his men out of the city to fight against them. And so it was that Joseph and Azariah were put to flight and pursued unto the borders of Judea. And there were slain in that day of the people of Israel about 2,000 men. So this Joseph and Azariah, man, they got 2,000 men killed. Because they were just wanted to get themselves a reputation. They wanted to be known. They wanted to be famous. Thus was there a great overthrow among the children of Israel, because they were not obedient unto Judas and his brethren, but thought to do some valiant act. Moreover, these men came not of the seed of those by whose hand deliverance was given unto Israel. Howbeit the man Judas and his brethren were greatly renowned in the sight of all Israel, and of all the heathen, wheresoever their name was heard of. You see that right there? So even the heathens like, dang, I like this Judas guy. Sound all right. He sound cool. Just killing all these thousand men. He sound all right. But of course, that's not the same for Joseph and Azariah, who just didn't fight because they wanted to help and protect the people, but because they wanted to be famous. All right. Insomuch as the people assembled unto them with joyful acclamations. Afterward went Judas forth with his brethren, and fought against the children of Esau in the land toward the south, where he smote Hebron and the towns thereof, and pulled down the fortress of it, and burned the towers thereof round about. From thence he removed to go into the land of the Philistines, and passed through Samaria. At that time certain priests, desirous to show their valor, were slain in battle. for that they went out to fight unadvisedly. You see that right there? So again, you had these people who just want to be famous, so they go out and they fight because they want to be like Judas. Not they want to be like him in that he leads and cares for the people. They don't want to be him in that manner. They don't want to be like him in that manner. They want to be like him in that he's famous. So Judas turned to Ashdod. Azotus is Ashdod, in the land of the Philistines. And when he had pulled down their altars and burned their carved images with fire and spoiled their cities, he returned into the land of Judea. So here we see him taking Ashdod. All right. So from here, and this will probably be the last thing we read about in First Maccabees chapter 6. And we're going to go back to Second Maccabees for some more details on the same thing. But I want to go ahead and read this in First Maccabees chapter 6. About that time, King Antiochus, traveling through the high countries, heard say that Elamaeus in the country of Persia was a city greatly renowned for riches, silver, and gold, and that there was in it a very rich temple, wherein were coverings of gold and breastplates and shields, which Alexander the son of Philip, the Macedonian king, who reigned first among the Grecians, had left there. You see that right there? So Antiochus said, look, I need some money. I'm going to go into Persia and get this that Alexander left, all this gold and silver and riches. Wherefore he came and sought to take the city and to spoil it, but he was not able, because they of the city, having had warning thereof, rose up against him in battle. So he fled and departed thence with great heaviness and returned to Babylon. You see it right there. So he wasn't able to take that city in Persia. So he came back to Babylon. Moreover, there came one who brought him tidings into Persia that the armies which went against the land of Judea were put to flight, and that Lysias, who went forth first with a great power, was driven away of the Jews, and that they were made strong by the armor and power and store of spoils which they had gotten of the armies whom they had destroyed. You see that right there? So ain't nothing going Antiochus' way. All right, he wanted to do this and that in Persia. That didn't work out. He told Lysias to do this and that to the Jews. That didn't work out. All right. Also, that they had pulled down the abomination which he had set up upon the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had compassed about the sanctuary with high walls as before, and his city Bethsura. Now when the king heard these words, he was astonished and sore moved, whereupon he laid him down upon his bed and fell sick for grief, because it had not befallen him as he looked for. Right? So he's realizing, oh dang, maybe I'm not God. Because remember, this is Antiochus. He surnamed himself Epiphanes, which means God manifested on earth. That's how he viewed himself. Now things ain't going his way. He's like, dang. Now he's depressed. And there he continued many days, for his grief was ever more and more, and he made account that he should die. You see that right there? So he got depressed, and in his depression he got sick. Wherefore he called for all his friends and said unto them, the sleep is gone from mine eyes, and my heart faileth for very care. And I thought with myself, into what tribulation am I come, and how great a flood of misery is it, wherein now I am, for I was bountiful and beloved in my power. But now I remember the evils that I did at Jerusalem, and that I took all the vessels of gold and silver that were therein, and sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judea without a cause. I perceive, therefore, that for this cause these troubles are come upon me, and behold, I perish through great grief in a strange land. Then called he for Philip, one of his friends, who he made ruler over all his realm, and gave him the crown and his robe and his signet, to the end he should bring up his son Antiochus and nourish him up for the kingdom. So Antiochus died there in the 149th year, right? So that's the next year after the dedication of the temple. All right. So we're going to stop there in First Maccabees chapter 6, and we're going to jump over. That's where we're going to end First Maccabees. But Second Maccabees just goes into a little bit more detail. So we got to hit that. Second Maccabees chapter 9, starting with verse 1. About that time came Antiochus with dishonor out of the country of Persia, for he had entered the city called Persepolis, and went about to rob the temple and to hold the city. Whereupon the multitude, running to defend themselves with their weapons, put them to flight. And so it happened that Antiochus, being put to flight of the inhabitants, returned with shame. You see that right there? So we have specifically saying it was a temple that he was trying to rob. A temple of which Persian god, I could not tell you, but he was in Persepolis. Now when he came to Ecbatane, news was brought him what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus. Then swelling with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Jews the disgrace done unto him by those that made him flee. You see that right there? So now he's mad because he just lost in Persia, in Persepolis. Now by the time he got to Ecbatane, he said, oh, now I'm really pissed off. Now I'm going to take it out on the Jews, right? Therefore commanded he his horsemen to drive without ceasing, and to dispatch the journey, the judgment of God now following him, for he had spoken proudly in this sort, that he would come to Jerusalem and make it a common burying place among the Jews. He said, look, I'm going to turn Jerusalem to a graveyard. He said, I'm going to turn that temple to a cemetery. But the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague. Or as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remediless came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts. And that most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. You see that right there? So it's all coming back upon him. We read about him getting depressed in First Maccabees, but here we see the physical sickness coming upon him as well. All right. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews, and commanding to haste the journey. But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pained. You see that right there? So he's still trying to do this and that, but he fell out of his chariot. These days it would be like a car accident, because he was driving reckless. All right. And thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea, so proud was he beyond the condition of man, and weigh the high mountains in a balance, was now cast on the ground and carried in a horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifest power of God. You see that right there? So any man who thinks he's more than a man gonna get humbled by God. All right, it's just facts. It's just how it always works. So that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man, and while he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. You see that right there? So he was his flesh, his sickness was so messed up that even it said his smell was noisome. He was loud. His smell was loud to all his army. They didn't even want to be around him. And the man that thought a little afore he could reach to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. You see that right there? So nobody wanted to carry him around in a hospital bed, because he smelled so bad because this disease that was on him. Here therefore, being plagued, he began to leave off his great pride, and to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of God, his pain increasing every moment. You see that right there? So now he's starting to humble down and realize, oh, God is doing this to me because I've said so many great things against God and against his people. And when he himself could not abide his own smell, he said these words: it is meet to be subject unto God. He said, it's good to be subject to God. It's a right thing to be subject to God. And that a man that is mortal should not proudly think of himself if he were God, right? So he's finally understanding that, oh, I shouldn't have said all those things that I said. I shouldn't have done all those things that I done. This wicked person vowed also unto the Lord, who now no more would have mercy upon him, saying thus, that the holy city, to the which he was going in haste to lay it, even with the ground, and to make it a common burying place, he would set at liberty. So now, as he's on his deathbed with this disgusting disease, he's praying unto God, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll make all the citizens of Jerusalem free. And as touching the Jews, whom he had judged not worthy so much as to be buried, but to be cast out with their children to be devoured of the fowls and wild beasts, he would make them all equals to the citizens of Athens. He said, I'm gonna give the Jews Greek citizenship, and I'm gonna do this and that. And the holy temple, which before he had spoiled, he would garnish with goodly gifts and restore all the holy vessels with many more. And out of his own revenue defray the charges belonging to the sacrifices. He said, look, I'll give everything back to the holy temple. I'll give more than I took. I'll pay. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll pay everything to the temple. Yea, and they also he would. Yea, and that also he would become a Jew himself and go through all the world that was inhabited and declare the power of God. He said, "Look, I'll start keeping all the laws. I'll be a Jew. I'll tell everybody to convert. Just anything. He's saying all these things to try to get God to have mercy on him." But for all this, his pains would not cease, for the just judgment of God was come upon him. Therefore, despairing of his health, he wrote unto the Jews the letter underwritten, containing the form of a supplication after this manner. All right. So, we know according to First Maccabees that he died in Babylon, right? But he had his car accident in Ecbatane, right? So the people had to carry him to Babylon, and that's where he felt the weight of this disease. That's where he wrote this letter. All right, in verse 19. Antiochus, king and governor, to the good Jews, his citizens, wisheth much joy, health, and prosperity. You see that right there? So he's even in this letter, he's trying to flatter the Jews, right? So maybe they will pray for me if this reaches them in time, right? If ye and your children fare well, and your affairs be to your contentment, I give very great thanks to God, having my hope in heaven. You see that right there? So he done changed his attitude completely. As for me, I was weak, or else I would have remembered kindly your honor and goodwill returning out of Persia, and being taken with a grievous disease, I thought it necessary to care for the common safety of all. Not distrusting mine health, but having great hope to escape this sickness. He said, look, I'm hoping to escape this sickness. That's why I'm writing this. That's why I'm flattering y'all. That's why I'm giving thanks to God, because I hope to escape this sickness. But considering that even my father, at what time he led an army into the high countries, appointed a successor, to the end that if anything fell out contrary to expectation, or if any tidings were brought that were grievous, they of the land, knowing to whom the state was left, might not be troubled. Right, so this is where he leaves everything to his son, as we read in First Maccabees chapter 6. Again, considering how that the princes that are borderers and neighbors unto my kingdom wait for opportunities and expect what shall be the event, I have appointed my son Antiochus king, whom I often committed and commended unto many of you when I went up into the high provinces, to whom I have written as followeth. Therefore I pray and request you to remember the benefits that I have done unto you generally and in special, and that every man will be still faithful to me and my son. For I am persuaded that he, understanding my mind, will favorably and graciously yield to your desires. Thus the murderer and blasphemer, having suffered most grievously as he entreated other men, so died he a miserable death in a strange country in the mountains. You see that right there? So that's the end of Antiochus Epiphanes. He got what he deserved. All right. Yeah, all the wickedness that he did, he died in a very torturous and very painful manner. All right. And Philip, that was brought up with him, carried away his body, who also fearing the son of Antiochus went into Egypt to Ptolemais Philometor, right? Because it's Lysias who was entrusted to watch after Antiochus the fifth here, I believe. Antiochus Eupator. All right.